Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Wow, what a week, huh? What a week and a half. Yeah, we timed this event for the LA fires. It was a lot of advanced warning that we had. No, it's been a very difficult week, hasn't it? And talking about a timely topic, the issue of disaster preparedness is, I think, on a lot of our minds right now as we look at what happened to our neighbors in the Eaton fire and Palisades and other fires. And we're never very far away, are we, from more disasters striking? And we're going to hear a lot from Dr. Jenkins today, who's going to talk a lot about the frequency with which these events are happening and coming forward. So I'm so delighted to see such a great turnout tonight too, and I hope that you have a great time with me. My name is Greg Thorson. My day job is I'm a professor at the University of Redlands. I direct the Masters of Public Policy and Administration program. I'm an ANCA member and have been for a long time, and I also chair the CWIG, which is this working group for public forums that we put on every month. We got a great set of programs for you. We're going to tell you a little bit about those at the end of the night. First of all, how many of you, is this your first public forum for ANCA? Could you raise your hands up? Wow, fantastic. Delighted to have you here. I just want to tell you just a bit about ANCA. First of all, it's an environmental-based group, but really open to people of all parties, persuasions, ideologies, anyone who wants to protect and think that the earth is a wonderful place and we want to preserve it to be a great, wonderful place. We've got a robust set of programming that, again, is nonpartisan, evidence-based. We tend to bring in an expert, at least one expert every month, but then move quickly towards drilling down to how can we make that actionable? How can the things that we do at home, what can we do different in our daily lives? So it's a combination of educational as well as like a call to behavioral kind of changes. Can everybody hear okay?
Yeah.
That's working fine, fantastic. Just to tell you a little bit about then ANCA too, we've got several different programs that we're working on, from cooler homes and cooler neighborhoods to disaster preparedness, which we're working on tonight, water conservation, having access to localized healthcare, biodiversity issues, localized economies, low carbon transportation system, lots of cool stuff. And so we're going to tell you a little bit about some of our upcoming programming coming up soon as well. Okay, so one of the things that we're a strong believer in, and here I am, I don't want to be a political scientist too much tonight, but college professor, it's hard to get out of us, is there's been this overall decline in what we call social capital, that people don't know each other anymore. And as a result then, that hurts our ability though, at a neighborhood level, to deal with anything. Any type of disaster, any type of challenge, and that knowing our neighbors is critical to solving problems, right? So we're just gonna start out like we do, Linda started this out, we're gonna start out by just, if you would, get to know your neighbor for just a couple of minutes. And what we wanna do is, if you describe a number two, well, first of all, people that you don't know, we call them strangers, right? That alone sets the tone. People that you don't know necessarily, they may be strange, but they're not necessarily strange. So if you would just meet somebody that you don't know yet tonight, if you would, for just a couple minutes to kick us off. Describe a little bit why you're here tonight, what drew you here, and what you hope to learn. And then something that you've done or are considering doing to help the earth. Can be around your home, possible changes in your behavior, routines, and if it's nothing, you can say nothing. But hopefully it's something. Would you just do that with the neighbor? Meet someone you know right now, do that for just a few minutes. that we're likely to support a variety of kind of social initiatives or just things that we're more likely to be able to act collectively together to solve problems. And so thank you for getting to meet some people around you too. I think just as a human as well, there's a lot of research that suggests the more engaged that we feel, the happier we are, depression's less likely, so there's all sorts of benefits to that. And feel free to talk more with the folks at the end of the program tonight after we let you out. So tonight's agenda is phenomenal. Dr. Hillary Jenkins is here to talk with us. As a professor at the U of R, I'll be introducing her a little bit more, kind of give that a real, we like to start every meeting to where you learn something right away and learn a lot. It's like a free college class, but more interesting than some of our classes. Okay, and so that you always feel like you came away like you learned a lot. And then we're going to have Linda Hamilton and Anna Kaplan, who are, we work with a lot in the ANCA Map Your Neighborhood program, our own disaster preparedness program. And they're going to talk a little bit about that, lead you through some exercises, so we can learn a lot more and be more prepared by the end of the night, and better yet, have opportunities to really become prepared in terms of some of the sponsored curriculum that they are hosting in our own community. And then, of course, the exciting part. I want to hear from you, Q&A. We'll bring all three of them up here and ask some questions and have some engagement with you about things that you want to know. And so that's the format for tonight, followed by announcements of our upcoming programs, which we've got a lot. So first up, Dr. Jenkins, my colleague at the U of R, professor and endowed chair, head co-chair at the University of Maryland Department of Environmental Studies, PhD from Duke in Earth and Ocean Sciences, areas of expertise in hydrology, geology, paleoclimatology, dendroclimatology, and isotope geochemistry. There you go. Former member and board of directors, San Bernardino Valley Water Conservation District. I got to sneak a quick look at her PowerPoint. So excited for you all. Will you please join me in welcoming Dr. Hillary Jenkins.
Well, thank you, Greg, for such a wonderful introduction. I feel very fortunate to be with you all tonight discussing what is such a timely and relevant topic, that of disaster here in the Inland Empire. I'd like to begin by asking you to close your eyes. And as you do so, I'm going to play for you a sound clip. And I want you to think about the imagery that this sound evokes for you. You can open your eyes. I many of you already have. What you just heard is the sound of 100-mile-per-hour winds blowing through the San Gorgonio Pass. This is the equivalent of a Category 2 hurricane making its way through the mountains. And unfortunately, this is the velocity that we observed making its way toward LA just last week to devastating effect. This is an image from the Eaton Fire in Pasadena, and you can see the evidence of the strength of that wind in the linear nature of the embers here captured as they migrate across the land surface. This is the Palisades Fire. You can see wind again, whipping the fire to great heights as it moves up the hill slope. And unfortunately, images like this are what we have been seeing in the news for the past week. The Palisades fire is currently burned over 23,000 acres and is only 19% contained. The Eden fire is over 14,000 acres, a bit more contained at 45%. 25 people have lost their lives in the last week and a half. Unfortunately, entire communities that once looked like this neighborhood in Pasadena, now look like this. Over 7,000 structures have been destroyed in these fires. This includes homes, community centers, schools, grocery stores, entire communities. The cost of these wildfires has been estimated to be between $250 and $275 billion, making the LA fires the most expensive disaster the United States has ever seen. Now, why have these fires been so devastating? Well, the answer lies with the sound clip you heard, wind. The Santa Ana winds are something that we're familiar with colloquially. We hear this term. But what are they and how do they form? Well, to answer that, I need to show you an image of average maximum temperature, which is given here, where a bluer color denotes cooler temperatures and orange to reddish color denotes warmer temperatures in Fahrenheit. And I'm showing you those temperatures during the onset of the winter season and the end of the fall. What you can see is something we might expect, which is that higher latitudes are colder, and as we move southerly, we start to see warmer temperatures. But that starts to become more dramatic at the onset of the winter season, causing this area to be quite cool relative to this region. This is significant because the cooler area generates what we refer to as the high pressure over the Great Basin. In contrast, a warmer area generates the opposite, a low pressure. And we see this form in Southern California and off of our coast. This is a production of a seasonal change in temperature that occurs in the winter season. And unfortunately, what we see is when we have a pressure gradient or a high and a low, the air will flow from high to low. So we generate winds that move in a northeasterly direction down here towards Southern California. And my apologies, we make reference to winds based on where they come from, not where they go. That's why we call them northeasterly. They move to the southwest. An unfortunate consequence of this movement of air from the northeast to the southwest is that it moves over mountains here in Southern California. As this wind moves over mountains, it tends to channelize and passes in these little gaps in the mountains, and that acts as a wind tunnel and will intensify the wind speeds. An unfortunate secondary consequence of this change in elevation is that air actually compresses as it moves from high elevation to low elevation. And when it compresses, it heats up. So we tend to generate very fast moving and very hot winds associated simply with the directionality of northeast to southwest combined with the topographic relief of the mountains. So these are the Santa Ana winds. And something we're familiar with, I've told you that they're a seasonal, predictable thing. But that doesn't answer the question of why this year in particular was so severe, because we do get Santa Ana winds annually. To answer this question, I'm going to show you a precipitation anomaly. And to preface it, I'm going to tell you that a normal Southern California winter is wet. Now, we don't get a lot of rainfall, but if we are going to get any, it's going to be in the winter. What a precipitation anomaly is going to tell us how different was this past winter season, one we're in currently, compared with what is typical in this area. So, if this winter was anomalously dry, the values will be below 100%. If it was anomalously wet, they will be above 100%. Let's take a look. Here we can see in the reds of the southwestern US We are far below 100% of normal, meaning that we have had an exceptionally dry winter thus far. And I think we all know this fairly anecdotally. It has not rained when it typically does. In addition to this, a normal Southern California winter is cool. Right? It's certainly cooler than the summer. I'm going to return us to this average maximum temperature image, and this is the average of all of the Octobers, Novembers, and Decembers from 1895 to 2024. Okay, so this is kind of what the typical profile of temperature looks like over the onset of the winter season. Now I'm going to show you what it looked like this past winter. So what you can see by the change in the color is that it actually has been quite anomalously warm. We have had an exceptionally warm winter. And again, anecdotally, I think we would all agree, it's been really unusually and unseasonably warm. So the combination of exceptional warmth and exceptional drying has in many ways really primed the land surface in the area to fire hazard. So I do want to highlight an important point, which is that the Santa Ana winds give rise to, or arise from, I should say, a fairly typical climate pattern, one that is predictable and one that is seasonal. The Santa Ana winds, the consequence of which is an environmental hazard, the ability to spread fire rapidly. This past year, we had an increased intensity in that climate pattern, exceptionally warm, exceptionally dry. This has given rise to the increased environmental hazard that we have observed. Unfortunately, bad news doesn't end there. There are additional feedbacks that can arise when fire takes place. So if we begin with dry meteorological conditions similar to those we are experiencing currently, we know this gives rise to the hazard of fire. Makes it easier for the fire to spread and to burn. When fire burns, we see the loss of vegetation, similarly to what we observed with the line fire that burned over 43,000 acres this past fall. The loss of vegetation drives down a variable referred to as evapotranspiration, which is the combined loss of water from the land surface to the atmosphere, both loss from surface reservoir evaporation and the loss of water from plants. If these plants have been burned, they're unable to contribute water to the atmosphere. The consequence of this means less water vapor in the overlying atmosphere to condense and form as rainfall. So we actually see, following intense fire events, a reduction in rain. You can imagine what a reduction in rainfall will do to a dry meteorological condition. And this is what we refer to as a positive feedback loop, in that it amplifies itself with time. Even more striking is the fact that this feedback loop occurs in the absence of changes to the climate. Without climate change, we see this natural feedback loop. Add changes in the predictability and timing of the seasonality of temperature, for example, and we see even more dramatic effect. Now, interestingly, fire can also give rise to other types of hazards. If we go back to a fire hazard resulting in loss of vegetation, what we can see as a consequence of this in areas particularly with high topographic relief is we decrease something called slope stability. Now, plants and trees dig into the land surface. Their roots grow, and they really bind the soil and the rock material to the surface very tightly. When they burn, we see a decrease in that coupling between the soil and rock material in the near surface and the underlying bedrock. This decreases the stability of the slope and results in hazards like landslides and mudslides. The slope is also less capable of absorbing water that falls when it rains, so this can enhance flooding hazard as well. We actually saw an example of the compounding nature of these types of hazards here locally. starting with the El Dorado fire in 2020. Many of you probably remember this was our the gender reveal fire that burned out of control in the onset right smack during COVID as well. This image is kind of showing the perimeter of the burn. We're down here in Redlands, and this image is sort of looking east at the San Bernardino Mountains. We can see Mentone and Yucaipa here. This occurred on September 14th, continued to burn for a long time after that. Burned roughly the equivalent of the acreage that has burned in the Palisades fire. Most of what burned here is forest ecosystem on either side of Forest Falls, the Mountain Home area. And rather incredibly, almost 2 years to the day, we actually had a fairly anomalous rainfall event. So this was on September 12th in 2022. We had 1.1 inches of rain fall in about a 2-hour period, which doesn't sound like very much, but represents about 10% of the rainfall we typically receive in an entire year. And it all fell in about 2 hours. This is an image of the 38, heading just past the hairpin turn at Forest Falls. This is what it looks like at about 3 o'clock on the 12th, and this is what it looks like at 3:30. There were multiple landslide events and mudslides on the 38 that washed it out, and actually sections of Oak Glen Road, if you recall, also washed out. This was a direct consequence of the fact that fire had removed vegetation from these land surfaces just 2 years prior, making them that much more susceptible to the hazard of landslide and mudslide. So, given these examples, you might be asking yourself, well, how on earth do we prepare for hazards such as these and the compounding feedbacks that ensue? And I would propose a 4-step process to preparation, beginning with defining the hazard. We need to understand how these feedbacks work so that we know what hazards we are at risk of and when for a given area. From there, and using our understanding of the science, behavior of the Earth system, we can forecast their occurrence. Based on that, we can begin to reduce our exposure and ultimately plan a response. So, if we start with defining the hazard, we have an image here of Redlands and our surrounding towns, and we see all of this high topographic relief to the northeast. So we know that landslides, and via the example I showed you, are a hazard that we should be concerned about in the mountains and in the foothills. Now, we don't get a lot of rain, but climate predictions do suggest that we will receive rain over an increasingly short period of time and very punctuated, often maybe 2 to 3 storms per year. So flooding is a concern as well. Fire is certainly a concern. We've seen that with the line fire right here, just to the east of us, as well as the fires we're seeing in LA. And we also need to be worried about heat waves. Models, again, show that heat waves are likely to increase in both frequency and intensity over the next 30 years. Now, all of these are fluid hazards or related to changes in the atmosphere and the climate system, but there is an important additional hazard that I have not yet put on this map. You actually have a hint at what it is, looking at this sort of what almost looks like a linear feature denoting the edge of the mountains. Anyone guess what it is? Yes, this is a fault line. And so, if I throw some of the major faults that run through this area, including the San Bernardino segment of the San Andreas, which is denoted here, we also need to consider earthquakes as a hazard that we are at risk for here. So this is a bit overwhelming. Right? We see this. Whew! You know, we're not kidding when we talk about California having 4 seasons. Right? In this case, 5, actually. So it is distressing as we think about it and hard to imagine putting together the plan. And so I think it's fair to ask the question, is there hope for preparation for reducing our exposure to these many hazards? And I would answer that question by way of an example. And my example is given for you here. Many of you might remember the Northridge earthquake of 1994. This was a magnitude 6.7 earthquake that occurred just to the northwest of Los Angeles. Very expensive, over $40 billion in damages to the structures and the infrastructure in the LA region. 9,000 people were injured and 57 people lost their lives. That loss of life is not to be understated and is important. However, relative to the number of people exposed to the hazard, this death toll represents less than 1% of the population. Most people who experienced Northridge survived, and they survived because of buildings like this. We can see that this building is terribly damaged, but it is still standing. Because it is still standing, people who were in this structure were able to leave, able to survive. By contrast, I'd like to tell you about an earthquake that occurred 9 years later in Iran, in 2003. This is the town of Bam in Iran, population of 43,000 people. Absolutely beautiful city with structures that date back to the Parthian dynasty, 248 BC, which for us Americans is fairly incomprehensible, just so old, but incredible. And I use this example because Bam in 2003 experienced the same magnitude earthquake that we experienced in Northridge in 1994. I'm going to show you the satellite image of what the city looked like after the earthquake event. As you can see, the city was destroyed. In fact, over 70% of it. Over 30,000 people were injured, and 27,000 people lost their lives. This represents 63% of the population of this town. So I give you this example between Bam and Northridge to highlight the fact that this is an ancient city dating back many, many years, whereas here in Southern California, we in many ways have the fortune of time. We happen to be much younger and have had building codes regulating the design of our structures that have been in place for more than 70 years. So to return to the question, is there hope for preparation and mitigation against disaster? Well, I would answer yes, there is. Science, our understanding of these disasters, our preparation, our building codes and regulations, planning offer great promise for mitigating disaster exposure. Thank you.
And thank you, Hillary. That was an amazing presentation. So much great information. And a message of hope in terms of what we can do and what we should work for. Just before we jump into now, how do we do emergency preparedness? How would this work? What are the things I need to be thinking of? And leading us through some exercises and specific information and pointing forward to a new program. Just wanted to talk about a real recent article that was just recently published on the preparedness payoff. So, do any of you work in schools? Raise your hand if you work in schools. Some people do. A lot of people know that, for example, preparation, you have to do it in advance. So, like in schools, for example, we'll do like active shooter drills and things like that. You can't wait until the disaster hits to start preparing for it. You literally have to spend the time beforehand. If you wait too long, the window is closed and it won't be available to you anymore. So the same thing kind of happens with other types of disasters as well. Luckily, most governments are actively involved in a lot of emergency preparedness. In the quantitative studies, I'm primarily see things through an economic lens, is that there's an enormous preparedness payoff. That doing the types of things that Linda and Anna are going to talk about really pay. It means, though, doing it before the fire's coming down the mountain or the winds are forecast to blow this hard. You can't wait for the disaster. But in general, the research finding is every dollar invested in resilience and disaster preparedness saves $13 in economic impact. So that's a huge, those of you who like economics, ROI. It's a tremendous return on investment. It's something that I would argue so far, Hillary, is that we're foolish not to do. To not think about the San Andreas in our backyard. To not think about the fire dangers and think, oh, the Eaton fire could never happen here, or the Palisades fire could never happen here. Or just hope that, oh, I don't want to think about it. We don't have that luxury, and we're reminded of that this last week, right? And so the good news is that we've got some folks who have histories of this and worked with it and have brought in a world-class curriculum. And so now I want to introduce two of our great ANCA members, Linda Hamilton, Linda, you made this whole thing possible, created ANCA, executive director and founder, also co-founder of a Food for All, very cool other nonprofit that she founded, had a lifetime of facilitation and training, and then Anna Kaplan, also a phenomenal job as program coordinator of this Map Your Neighborhood program. She's going to be the point person that if any of you coming out of tonight say that I want to actually go through and have some hours, invite facilitators to come lead my neighborhood through this, she's the person for you. She's going to talk about that now. She also had experience in the previous community that she came from, which was in old Sequoia country, actually new growth, but incredible hazardous wildfire. Did fire abatement prevention task group she was involved with there, is formally CERT trained, has extensive expertise in these issues, and leads a lot of the facilitation. So will you please join me in welcoming Linda Hamilton and Anna Kaplan.
Thank you, Greg. All right, I want to start by asking you a question. The question is about how prepared you are for a major disaster. So I want to do this on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 being most prepared, and 1 being hardly at all. And there's no judging here. We just want to kind of do a little screening here. This is probably a good slice of our whole society here. So how many of you are more on the low side, maybe the 1s and 2s, where you've probably been thinking I really should, but really haven't done very much? Hands up high. Okay, yeah. Not surprised. How about those of you who are kind of in the middle, like the number 3s? You've done some, but probably not enough. All right. And then who here? Do we have any super preppers here? Anybody who's really, really prepared? Nobody? I actually personally know a couple. Okay. So we have a ways to go. And I hope that you can agree with us that the neighborhood is a really important place to prepare in, to have a neighborhood plan, because that's what tonight is all about. And I'm reminded of a story interview that I saw last week. How many of you are watching all the fires on TV? Yeah, we probably have our fill of that. But this was an interview with an actor by the name of James Woods, and he lived in a neighborhood that had to be evacuated. He was tucked into his hotel with his laundry basket full of dirty clothes and his car keys. That's all he brought with him. Can you imagine bringing your dirty laundry to you? Anyway, but he suddenly remembered that he had a 94-year-old neighbor, and he started to worry about him. And so he called his neighbor, and nobody answered. So he happened to have the number of his neighbor's son, who lived in another state. He called him and to ask about his dad, And the son said, well, he just got home from the hospital yesterday with a home health aide. So Woods thought, okay, well, he was still worried. He called back, no answer again. Finally, he called the fire department and asked the fire department to check on him. And so they actually did. They got up there in the midst of this disaster and checked. And they called Woods back and said, you know what, he's not here. We haven't found him. And Woods knew this person well enough. He said, you know, there's a room behind the kitchen that's not evident. See if you can check in there. And so they went and checked, and sure enough, there was this 94-year-old man sitting there. So they saved a life. That was really amazing. And following that, Woods made this impassioned plea. He said, know your neighbors, have a plan, for God's sake, get prepared, in that order. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's our slogan for Map Your Neighborhood. And that came from actual experience. Oops, I need a clicker, right? Okay, so I thought that was a really good setup for talking about Map Your Neighborhood. Most of you, some of you, have heard about this program a little bit already, but Anna and I want to do a deeper dive. So first of all, why are neighborhoods important in preparing for disasters? Well, first of all, it's where we live, right? That's important. And we're likely to be there when a disaster strikes. Would you agree? Yeah. And I don't know why, but so many disasters seem to strike in the middle of the night. I have often woken up and kind of wondered, gee, you know, if an earthquake happened now, what would I actually do, right? Anybody else have that experience? Thinking about that at night? And statistics actually show us that how well we know our neighbors is a major factor in how well we come through a disaster. So what do we do to get prepared in our neighborhood? Well, we would like to suggest Map Your Neighborhood. This is an incredibly effective program that doesn't take a whole lot of effort, but really gets a neighborhood off to a good start and being much better prepared. So it all starts, well, let me tell you first, it's only an hour and a half long. When we talk about the Map Your Neighborhood program, it's an hour and a half, that's all. And people tell us at the end, that's exactly the right amount of time. That's the kind of time I can take out of my busy schedule to get ready for a disaster, okay? So it all starts with someone who decides to host a Map Your Neighborhood event in their home. And the host personally invites each of their 15 to 20 closest neighbors. And you might think 15 to 20, that's a pretty small group. That is the number of people that you can actually check on and take care of in the first hour immediately following a disaster. And that hour is called the golden hour, because that's where you can make the most difference. And then each hosted event is conducted by 2 trained ANCA facilitators or presenters, so the host doesn't have to worry about any of that. And ANCA provides all of the materials necessary, so there's no cost to the host, and you get to be the hero of your neighborhood, because I'm not kidding you, people will thank you as they're going out the door. They really enjoy this event, they find it very valuable, and they're so happy to get to know their neighbors better. So what this program covers, and Alan's going to give you much more detail on this, but there's 2 basic things. One is the 9 essential steps that we need to take in that first hour following a major disaster. What we do in that first hour is critical. That's one big piece. The second is developing a neighborhood plan. And you would be surprised how much we get done in that short amount of time. And it's having a neighborhood plan, again, has been proven. It can save lives, it can reduce the severity of injuries, and it can help protect property. And a plan will make sure that everybody gets checked on, everybody gets cared for. So that is kind of the essence of the Map Your Neighborhood program. So we want to have you, engage you in a little exercise now. That's why you're sitting at tables tonight. So there's a stack of blank paper there, do you see it? So everybody grab a sheet of paper, everybody, and a pencil. If there's not enough pencils for everyone, or you need more paper, raise your hand. Got it? Okay, so in Redlands, we don't have defined neighborhoods, right? And in fact, sometimes I ask people like something about their neighborhood, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't know any of my neighbors." So it's really interesting. We have a lot of work to do in Redlands to build neighborhoods. So what I want us to do is just to imagine for a few moments our neighborhood, okay? So we're going to draw a picture of it, like this map up here. There's the street, and the little boxes are houses. You don't have to be an artist to do this, okay? So some of you are starting to draw already. Some of you have straight streets. You just have to make 2 straight lines at your street. You draw the houses down each side. Some of you might have a curving street. Draw 2 lines in a curve, okay? And then begin plotting the houses. You might, so think 15 to 20. Like we did Buena Vista and San Gregorio streets, the first block in our neighborhood. And there were enough homes that we had to do 2 on in the block. Okay, so you kind of have to plot maybe your own house and then see if you're kind of in the middle, you want to decide which direction you're going to go in, and just kind of figure it out. Who are the 15 to 20 households that you might want to invite to your Map the Neighborhood program? Okay? Just very quickly, don't stress. This map up here shows little ADUs behind. Some of you might have those. Those are little tiny houses behind a bigger house where people can live. (15 to 20), that's the magic number.
No houses. No, 15 to 20 houses. Yes.
You finish up in about 2 minutes. Anybody finish already?
Very much like
Okay, and those, if you're getting almost done, time is going by quickly. Maybe just put a check mark on the houses where you know the people who live there. You have some kind of a relationship with them, okay? Put a check mark there. If you know them really well, put 2 check marks. How many do you actually know? Yeah.
You did last night.
Okay, I know you may not be completely done, but at least you might have some sort of an idea of your neighborhood. So just real quick, what did you discover about your neighborhood in doing this little exercise? An insight or understanding that came to you about your neighborhood? Anybody? What's that?
You don't know enough people.
You don't know enough people, okay, for 15 to 20. So that means you're going to have to knock on the doors of people that you don't know. Oh my gosh, yeah. The best thing to do, if that's scary to you, is find another neighbor you know well and take them with you. The two of you go together. Anything else that came to you as you did this?
We're just, as a society, we're just too disconnected.
Oh, I'm so happy you said that. That is exactly right. And that's why I love this program so much, is because it brings people together and they're so happy to be together. And when you work together, when you create a plan together, that builds relationships better than anything I know of. All right. So I hope, take your maps home with you, think about this. So thank you for doing that, and I'm going to bring Anna up here.
Before we switch slides, hi everybody. I just wanted to say, if you could think about, when you leave tonight also, think about what in your neighborhood feels like a risk to you. One of the risks that we talked about earlier for a disaster. Just think about it. We don't have to do any more about it today. Like, do you have a lot of tall trees? Do you have no trees? Do you have a lot of space in between your homes? Is there a lot of brush that grows? Are people mitigating those? They're doing their fire abatement. Those kind of things. Oh, there we go.
The other day when it was windy, and I just wanted to run, if not those,
Okay.
those tonight, like, where do you go?
How to get started. So our program is about inviting your neighbors, like Linda just said. We're gonna when you're interested, when you find time and you decide to do it. I want to tell you that there's sign-up sheets, by the way, on all of your tables. There's two options. You can be a host and a facilitator. At the end, we can talk a little bit more about that, but if you decide that you want to, you just have to contact me. I'm the Map Your Neighborhood coordinator. So we'll give you all of my contact information at the end of the program. You're going to schedule a 30-minute visit with me. I'll come to your house. And we'll talk about what your neighborhood is, your 15 to 20 neighbors. And we will also choose a date. Right now we're pretty booked up already. So we're not, you don't have to feel like you have to commit right away. We probably won't schedule you until the end of February or March or beyond. We have gotten a lot of interest. And we're going to provide you with, this is the invitation that we developed, and it'll have your name on it and your address. And then, like Linda said, you can meet people, you can take someone with you. If you have a hard time, if you would like to host, but you have a hard time walking, I'm happy to go walk with you. I'll actually help you walk the neighborhood. We know that it's hard to do, so. Mapping your neighborhood agenda. On your tables, you also have these workbooks. I only put 2 out because I want you to just listen to what I'm saying, but also you can take a few minutes and pass them around and share. I'm not going to go through the whole workbook tonight. But I will tell you that there's when you host, we do ask the host to introduce the facilitators. We will send 2 facilitators to your home. They'll come a half an hour early and help you get set up. So as a host, you're not responsible for any materials. We just asked you to have some places, some extra chairs in case a lot of people show up. And so the host will welcome us and all of their guests. And then there's an introduction, a discussion about disasters, similar to what we had. And then there's the 9 steps immediately following a disaster that this program helps you do a 9-step, how to get through, like what you do first and what you do at the end of being prepared to help your neighbors. And then there's the neighborhood plan. The neighborhood plan is what most people get really excited about. We bring an enlarged map of your neighborhood that we determined at your host meeting. And then we help you map your gas meters. The reason for that is because fires can start during disasters from broken gas lines. And so that's one of the best things that you could do with the map. The name of the program is Map Your Neighborhood. Sorry, I'm being super thirsty. It's the best thing you can do to help save lives and minimize minimize damage to your property. So we are going to map your gas meters, and we're going to also do a little map. We don't identify each person, but we do put a little dot next to the homes that have vulnerable people living in them, which is also, I would like you to keep in mind that as people leave your neighborhood, you're going to want to keep up on your maps. So, so whoever lives there now, at the time that we do our meeting, we're going to map where the vulnerable people are. And we're also, what else are we mapping? We're also mapping skills and equipment. Thank you. Which is also really great because that is another way that you get to learn about your neighbors and what kinds of things that they have to help. For instance, not everybody has a chainsaw, but you might need a chainsaw if a tree goes down and you can't get out of your neighborhood because of it. And of course, we're only going to borrow those things from people when we need them in a disaster. This is not to find out who has that lawnmower I didn't want to borrow. Oh, sorry, I went too far. Oh, and then we do just a quick review. There is a test, which I like to tell everyone ahead of time, so you have to be prepared. You're going to have to listen carefully during the 1.5 hours. And then we talk about the next steps. Not everyone from your neighborhood will show up at your hosted event, but we want to help everybody. So we want to give everybody the information that you got and help them to be prepared also, even if they were unable to make it. And then we do some closing flyers they change a little bit, but right now they're from the City of Redlands, FEMA, and from CERT. Does everyone know what CERT is? Community Emergency Response Training. That is a really great thing to do. I highly recommend it. Right now they don't have a schedule for some reason, but they do allow you to sign up in the hopes, I think, of organizing around people who sign up for the training. So it's a 3-day program, also free from the City of Redlands. Your neighbors will thank you. These are some quotes from people. I get texts all the time from people that we've hosted at their house, and it is so heartwarming. They're very sweet. People really appreciate it, and they really, even people like, I've facilitated a lot of them right now, and whenever I facilitate, you look out at the people, and everybody's like, much like right now, you're all looking at me. I can't tell what you're thinking. But, and then at the end, people are so grateful that they feel like they've done something important and that they have important information to share with their neighbors. Okay, stay connected with your neighbors. As I mentioned the previous slide, you really need to stay connected with your neighbors, otherwise this doesn't work. So it's not just a one and done situation. You really have to stay on top of it. One of the things we recommend, I do it in my neighborhood before I even started working on this program, is I started collecting my neighbors' phone numbers and emails, and so we communicate for varieties of reasons. And that makes it more accessible during a disaster. I feel like now we know each other. I know that somebody is teaching somewhere and has put on a special art installment somewhere, and they'll alert me to those things. It's fun. I'm not saying you all have to do that, but I am saying that it helps you to form bonds with your neighbors, to form a contact list and an email list or text thread, and then make sure to welcome new neighbors and share the plan. So we ask the host to kind of maintain this. It's the one thing that is an ongoing responsibility of the host, but if the host moves, they should also find someone else to do it so that your neighborhood does stay connected. And it really sounds like maybe an extra thing to do, but it's not that hard once you get it going. And stay updated. We're working on our website. I have to say it's not great at the moment, but we are working on it, and we're always looking for volunteers. So if you're good at that, please contact us, because we do need an updated website. And I'd like to put all of the information that we bring in flyer form. I would love to stop using paper. So if we had a really great website, we would not need as much paper, that's for sure. Anyway, so yeah, we want you to keep in communication though. If you need more workbooks, if someone moves out of the neighborhood and you need another one to give to the new neighbors, contact us. We'll happily bring you some. And let's make Redlands the most disaster-prepared city in the Inland Empire. It sounds like a challenge. I don't know if you guys are, up for the challenge, but it is nice to be, like when you read about cities that are doing something really great, doesn't it make you feel like, oh, I wish I had done something like that? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish that we lived in a city that was very prepared. It would be great. It would be a good feeling. So we want you to host your neighborhood. We want you to meet your neighbors and be prepared, save lives, minimize property damage. We also want you to tell your friends, families, and coworkers how rewarding it will be to host an event in their neighborhood. So not everybody knows about this. One of the things, I just did an event last night, and one of the people asked, how did the host hear about us? And the host heard about us because she knows about ANCA. But now we're putting the word out to a lot of different places. So I feel like it's up to all of us to keep spreading that word. And then 3, get trained to become an MYN presenter. I know we said it was really fun, but it really is fun. Like and we're looking to get a huge amount of volunteers, like 100. I would love to get 100 volunteers so that people are not, because I know a lot of times people think, oh, I'm volunteering and now I'm going to be the only one doing this. I don't have time for that. Well, if we had 100 volunteers to present, that wouldn't be the problem. The problem would be like, oh, I never get to present because somebody else is always taking them. And, oh, this is really cool, actually. I think it's Dick and Linda have put together a newly formed Interfaith Climate Action Coalition. So a lot of our faith-based churches and communities are starting to gather. And the churches are encouraging members of their congregation to host their neighborhoods. So we actually have 4 scheduled churches, events where the whole church, they invited us at times where most congregants will be there in the hopes that these people will sign up to become hosts or presenters. And this is my contact information and ANCA's contact information. Please take a photo, or there's also other things you can, there are QR codes over here too for everything. But we hope that you will get into contact with us. And
Thank you so much, Anna. If I could ask the speakers to come forward for a Q&A period. Oh, okay. Let's see. First slide. No. How's that? Yeah, absolutely.
okay, forgot to say something else. And it goes with that slide before this one of the interfaith. That's not the only place that we can get volunteers from. We would love it if you have a business and you would like your businesses to contact us for presenting or for hosting. That's another great way to get the word out. So please consider, if you work at a big place or you have a lot of connections, keep us in mind.
Fantastic. Well, you've been an incredible audience. Now it's time to open up for questions, though. You've all been riveted and focused in. It's your time to ask questions to any of our presenters, and no question is a dumb question. Even as a professor, we've heard them all. There are no dumb questions. So fire away. Who would like to ask some questions? Yes, please.
On the going-in piece, so are you saying at the initial meeting where we're meeting with you to establish the next meeting for our neighborhood, that that when we map our neighborhood, that then thereafter there's a professional map by the city that would show the gas meters, or is that?
Question to everybody else.
So the question is, at the meeting, the 30-minute meeting at your home, if you volunteer to host, does the map come with the gas meters? And the answer to that is, there is a map. I enlarge a map of your street. The one that we decide, the homes that we decided on. And we ask on the invitation for people before they arrive to locate their gas meters. And so that's how we know.
Okay.
And then we just know from watching people that in our neighborhoods, because even if you think you don't know something about your neighbors, most people do know that there's somebody who uses a wheelchair over at this house over here. There's some children over here. There's this, that, and the other. So that's how we know where vulnerable people are. But unless they showed up, and then they will tell us that they're vulnerable.
Great. Other questions? Other questions that you have? Yes, please.
How do you make the map available to everybody? Where is this map?
Where is the map available? So we make it available to just you and your neighbors, and the way that I've been doing it is that after we're done with your map, the big and large one that we do at the event, then we ask you to get in touch with your neighbors, and I ask for a couple of weeks. We give them a couple of weeks to fill out their information. We have a different form for them, for people who did not attend. And then they will fill it out, and whoever fills it out, I put the information on the map, and then I take a picture of it, and I send it. I have everyone, at that point I have everyone's contact, but then we get rid of it. We are not collecting anyone's data. We're just doing it for you. It's really the program from the heart. We're not trying to get anything from you other than disaster preparedness.
Fantastic. Yes, sir.
Can you host if you live in a neighboring city that hires a lot of residents?
You know what? I think the answer should be yes, because we have been, it's like the faith-based organizations. We would come to you in a different capacity, where we might come to you and give an intro similar to tonight about why you would want to host in your Redlands neighborhood, and then those people would have to contact us for hosting their neighborhoods in Redlands. We're only doing Redlands right now, but we do get a lot of requests, and if eventually we might be able to help other people and other.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Iris.
Will you consider declutter the garage be part of disaster preparedness?
Actually, I think that's a really good question. I've seen garages packed full of things. I've seen patios around our place just packed full of things. And I've often thought, if a fire started there, who knows what's in there? Yeah, that absolutely is a fire hazard and should be cleared out.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm thinking about controlled burns. These fires, I heard that they weren't able to do that because regulations, and some people, groups are not allowing that. Would that be what you call prepare, if they control burn? As I said, it was mountainous, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think, so, you know, I didn't define percent containment when I mentioned it on the slide there, but essentially this is the percent of the perimeter around the fire that has something called a control line along it. And a control line is an area that either has already been burned, so you've removed the fuel, or you've actually physically scraped down the vegetation and created dirt. So there's some sort of barrier that just prevents any access to fuel, so the fire can't continue. So yeah, the question is a good one. This idea of controlled burns, and actually it's specifically a back burn, is what they would do during an actual fire to kind of get the vegetation to burn back toward the advancing fire in the hopes of putting out the fuel. That is particularly difficult to do in mountainous terrain. So it is done, and it's something that was done during the line fire and ultimately helped us get to 99% containment of that. But the mountainous terrain is going to make it very, very difficult combined with the wind. So I would say that just prevented an ability to kind of get in and set those fires because of the concern about getting up ahead of it, upslope, and then the wind moving so rapidly. Yeah.
Hillary, can you, one of your slides also encourages to assess what the actual risks were. In terms of, you need to know your area, and it's highly dependent what the risk is, and you need to start preparing for that risk. Because in some respects, your strategies might be different across different types of risks. Can you describe for us a little bit, from your experience and expertise, kind of what, if you were going to rank them or give percentage risk, really putting her on the spot, right? What are the largest risks for people who live in the Redlands area?
So, the problem is, you know, you've asked a scientist a quantitative question. So I feel like to answer it, I need to do some calculation. First, defining risk as probabilistic assessment. But I think I can think a little bit about that more based on my own work that I've done on these disasters. Well, I will say this. Most of the disasters that I referenced are what I refer to as fluid earth hazards, meaning they arise from behaviors in the atmosphere for the most part. And this is concerning because we are perturbing our atmosphere and we are experiencing profound meteorological and climatological changes. And so in some ways I would say we are artificially elevating, and by artificial I mean anthropogenically, human-induced elevation of the risk of these fluid earth hazards. And so if we think of those examples, I would probably lean toward things like fire, heat waves, I would say is going to be a big one. And then following fire, we will see a very tight coupling with things like flooding. So I would probably elevate those in many ways simply because of the changes that we are inducing currently.
Thank you. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Also for Dr. Jenkins, do you know, is there any talk from the power companies of possibly putting more power lines underground?
You know, I think that's a great question. I can't speak to what the power companies are planning. Yeah,
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah, the question was whether power companies, you know, Edison would be making plans to move lines underground instead of having them above ground. So I would just answer by saying I don't know of any specific plan to that effect. But I do have bad news in that regard, which is if we do consider earthquake hazard, which is a big one that we have, you know, sometimes having lines underground is actually unhelpful. and can result in rupture, yeah, when we start to shake the solid earth. And in fact, yeah, kind of thinking about turning off gas lines, it just made me think so much of San Francisco, 1906. Actually, the majority of the city burned in a fire, but that fire arose from ruptured gas lines due to shaking, yeah.
I just want to mention that our next program in February is, we're having somebody from Southern California Edison here. And they're going to talk about electrification, but bring your questions, yeah.
Excellent questions. Yes, ma'am.
What do you mean by heat wave? Is that just being super hot?
Yes, but we can be more specific in the definition. So it does, there are a variety of definitions one could use, but usually it would be a sustained temperature above a certain threshold for a certain period of time. So you might say when you have temperatures, above 105 degrees for longer than a 48-hour period, like something like that, daytime temperature.
What is that like? Comfortable.
Yeah, so actually, I do speak about heat waves. I teach a course on disasters, and I do speak about heat waves as kind of the hidden threat in many ways. That actually, people can suffer severe dehydration and actually can pass away from being in extremely hot condition. Typically, too, if they're confined inside of a home during a period of very, very hot times. The other thing, though, that I would say is that heat waves tax our systems, right? So during a heat wave, we're going to run our air conditioners very, very powerfully. Then we're going to need more electricity shunting to the grid to power all of our air conditioners. And we run the risk of a power line blowing out or part of the grid going off, igniting a spark, resulting in a fire. And so that, I think, becomes increasingly problematic. But I will say, too, one of the really troubling things is actually a lot of the projections show that heat waves not only are going to increase here, but will increase along the coast. And a lot of folks that live toward the coast actually don't have air conditioning at all. So really, that physical toll of being in very hot conditions for prolonged periods of time actually can be a real health concern. Great question.
Yeah, and I would say, by the way, that each summer in some inner city area, even in like areas of Chicago, we'll have hundreds of deaths from heat waves. So they really are, and to know where the vulnerable population is in the neighborhood is key to providing services, either to people without air conditioning or during brownout condition. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So does the changing climate affect us or put us at a higher risk of having more earthquakes in this area? How does that correlate?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. But I will, and I talked about both, but I would actually respond by saying no. There really is not a link between earthquake events and movements along fault lines that is related to atmospheric behavior or climate. Yeah, so there isn't, it's not really appropriate to make that correlation. We don't see that. Fault lines are triggered by tectonic stresses, which are driven by movement along these massive plates, and then the splintering of rock that occurs along those plate boundaries, which forms faults, which, when the rock breaks, give off seismic energy, which gets converted into these surface waves that actually physically distort the surface in the form of shaking. Yeah, but it's a great question. Not a link, though. Yeah.
It is interesting to look at your data as well. When you read Southern California emergency preparedness documents, the earthquake data is some of the most striking, though. It's so many scenarios have approximately 15,000 deaths in a simulation of a full-scale eruption from the Salton Sea running up to San Andreas, that it does require, even though it's a less frequent event than fire, the results can be catastrophic, as pointed out. So in terms of the risk assessment, it's a little bit hard because it might be less likely this year. We're sitting at the end of a loaded barreled gun, but at the same time, it doesn't go off very often. But you best prepare, because if it does go off, it's going to be catastrophic. Yeah. Yes.
So you all sort of talked about steps that can be taken to kind of mitigate risk, and our family is looking at ways we can sort of make our home a little bit more fire resistant, like better vent covers on the attic and that kind of thing. Do you guys have resources or a list of
beyond just don't keep wood around your house, are there?
Again, speaking for me personally, I've been very interested in this question as a public policy person. There are literally people, and they have posted some who are environmentalists built because they realized the region that they're in had fire cladded their house, all of their neighbors are destroyed, they're back in their homes. So there are absolutely, but that was a cladding issue combined with defensible space, all sorts of techniques. Again, it identifies what is the specific risk you want to mitigate against, and that's going to be very different than earthquake preparedness in terms of retrofitting your home and looking at the foundations and what you're at. And so it does require a significant amount of knowledge. You know, Anna will take you a long ways in terms of helping prepare and act collectively within your neighborhood. And I would just, by the way, point to this. I would encourage everyone to take a look at this, the 9 steps. I think that should be a, don't walk away without seeing this tonight in terms of that. Not only gas shutoffs, water shutoffs, but also Anna's got some great information on go bags. That was a really big deal. Are you ready with your go bag? And you don't have a lot of time when that happens before you need that. That's all kind of part of this sponsored FEMA curriculum that they're working with. It doesn't answer your question directly, but I do think, you know, it's not like we're short of knowledge. This couple had literally built their homes with that in mind. Because they said, this is crazy. We live in a place that systematically is prone to the types of things that Hillary studies and has done for decades. This shouldn't come to no surprise, and that they literally did kind of the investment towards that. Unfortunately, you know, again, as a public policy person, we're going to incentivize the quick rebuild. And that, of course, makes me go nuts. We complain when that happens on the Gulf Coast and the hurricane, like, oh, come on, are you serious? We're going to build those houses knowing those trends, and it's going to happen again and again. But the political pressures, right? We want people to get back in their homes. We're going to repeat the same mistakes. So part of this gets to be information, get knowledgeable about it, think about it, plan with it, and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just by way of example, after Hurricane Katrina, 2005, Category 5 hurricane, the levees in New Orleans were rebuilt. Well, first of all, they were built to withstand Category 3 conditions, and then they were rebuilt to withstand Category 3 conditions. But I would like to say, this isn't a practical example of how to prepare, but time and again, unfortunately, when I look at disasters at kind of the national response, state response level, the mantra that I tend to tell my students is, have a backup for the backup. Assume that your plan might fail, because time and again, unfortunately, we see this. Typically, again, more at kind of the state level or national level response to a disaster, but we have a plan in place and it fails, and then we don't have any plan in that case. And so I might just say, if you have a typical route you might take through your house to get out, maybe have a second one in case part of it has caved in and you can't leave via that route. Consider what that might be, or a driving route as you're leaving, right? That kind of thing.
I want to say a word too, that our city is just finishing off our climate action plan. And this has really gotten me to wondering, what is in there that could possibly address the concerns you raised? How, of course, we're all about, ANCA's all about building climate resilience, and this is definitely part of it. What are all the things that we need to do personally as well as a neighborhood? There's a lot to this, yeah. So thanks for raising that issue.
I just want to say also that I have been weirdly fortunate to have lived in 2 neighborhoods that had a high fire incidence. So what happened in those communities was that over time they started working together to do mitigation on their own, and working with the fire department. And so what the fire department ended up doing in both of those communities was annually they would go through and they would let you know if you were not in compliance. They didn't fine you, but they let you know. And if you were not in compliance the next year, then they would give you a small fine. But what happened in one of the neighborhoods, which I thought was really incredible, I moved into it, I had nothing to do with this, I just benefited from it, is that they organized by little kind of quadrant, like we're trying to do with neighborhoods, to help people mitigate their own, so that the fire risk, you know, everybody can, it's easy to look at somebody who's struggling and say, that whoever's are not taking care of their brush, and get mad, but there's probably a reason. And so we would go and help, and people would get together a couple of weekends of a year and go and mitigate the brush and stuff like that. So these are just things that you can do within your own neighborhoods. If you notice that someone needs help, go and help them. To organize the group to help and make fire resistance happen. And what I was going to say to you is that both of those communities had strict rules about having brush around your house, and also having too many things in your house. And so that's a similar. Like if we had rules that people could follow, you know, that you have to have a setback, and you have to have those things.
Thank you all so much. You've been a wonderful audience. Will you please also thank our panelists? Thank you all so much. Just a couple of things. I want to emphasize as well that, of course, how much is the cost of doing this? Free. All of it is. It's supported by a variety of grants that have been written. Again, here's another contact list with a QR code. What else to let you know of upcoming events that we have before we wrap up for tonight? First of all, we got a book club that's super fun that we encourage you to join. Next book is The Heat Will Kill You First, Life and Death on a Scorched Planet. Wow, is that an understatement, huh? And so the Redlands On Book Club meets monthly via Zoom from 7 to 8 o'clock. It's up on Thursday, January 23rd. You can register there. All of these are also up on the door, so if you don't get the QR code, you can get them there, and they're also on our website, which is, I actually really like our website. Take a look at it. Our Repair Cafe is the coolest thing in town, where instead of throwing it out, how about if we help you fix it for free? Okay, and so all of this stuff, repairable items, we got these volunteers, an army of volunteers that show up to help with bicycles, clothing, toys, custom computers, jewelry, fix all that stuff rather than just throw it out. And so again, you should register here. Again, it's up over there. In terms of the QR code, that's coming up Saturday, January 25th at 9 a.m. Again, this is an ANCA event from 9 to 12 here at the community center. Our all-volunteer monthly meeting. Hey, come join us. Actually join the group of volunteers who plans this stuff and works towards all of it. Then our next meeting is Monday, January 10th. We invite all of you to attend. Join us. Cheap animation from the professor. Next month is our next monthly meeting. Is super exciting. It's about this question that about electrifying the grid. We're moving from a variety of energy grids to a single clean energy grid, and this has been in the works for decades, and we're moving towards it by 2045. How should we think about that, and how might that affect like our decisions that we make within our house? And so there's a variety of issues, everything from heat pumps to induction stoves but even much smaller things, including insulation. And so we'll have Mark Cloud of Southern California Edison to talk about that, and that's February 19th is our next one of these events here at 6:30 to 8 p.m. At the community center. We've also got the March event is going to be led by Dick and Ladine on A Farewell to Lawns. This is preliminary, I stole your preliminary. A Farewell to Lawns, hello to drought-tolerant and eco-friendly landscapes. If you're tired of paying your high water bills and you want to get rid of your lawn and wonder what does it take to make a nice-looking, drought-tolerant, eco-friendly landscape, join Dick and Ladine to find affordable ways to do that. And so that's our March event. And then on Esri campus, we also have one of our U of R professors, Nick Rexton, one of our colleagues, talking about what's a healthy planet, moving towards a common framework to guide policy. Esri's got this outstanding Redlands Forum, and that will be co-sponsoring that event with them. If you'd like to support us, we like to be free, like all these events to be free. If you would kindly donate, we would be so grateful, whether it's $1 or $5, whether it's monthly or whether it's a one-time. We would love any support. We have a Venmo account, we have a PayPal account. We don't spend any of it on beer. No. It's just for our, it's to keep our programs going. And really want to thank you all for coming out tonight. You've been a wonderful audience. Oh. What's this? Okay, yep. And again, I hope some of you take this opportunity to work with on and do Map Your Neighborhood. Otherwise, I hope that some of you come to our future events. Regardless, we're so grateful you came out tonight. Have a wonderful night. Stay safe, everybody.